Olsson. I'm a faculty member at the National Center for Biological Sciences, which is the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Bangalore. I also have two other titles that I'm very proud of. One is that I'm the Global Director of the ECHO Network, and also I'm a Special Scientific Envoy to India for the Danish Academy of Technical Sciences. So I have three hats that I wear. I was born and grew up in the rural St. Lawrence Valley, which is in northern New York State of the United States. I grew up climbing trees and catching fireflies and working on a farm and baling hay and milking cows for my aunt. And so I grew up surrounded by nature. And one of my biggest dreams that I had growing up, I loved fairy tales and stories. And so I always had this dream of being able to talk to animals, okay? In fact, I used to talk to them kind of ridiculously. I used to talk to the squirrels and the rabbits and wish that they would talk back to me. And sometimes I'd imagine that they were talking back to me. And so when I was older, I heard about this field called chemical ecology. I actually read it when I was in high school in a random sentence in a science textbook. And no one in my family has been scientists. I'm a first generation college student myself. And so it was really hard for me to envision myself becoming a scientist or a researcher. But I was very fortunate to go to a camp for girls in STEM that was held at the local college near me. And that was my first experience meeting scientists, and especially meeting women scientists. And that was extremely important milestone in my life, because it was the first time I ever saw that someone like me could be a scientist and could do research. And so that was extremely influential. And that experience has actually influenced me a lot in my adult life about the need to expose ourselves as women scientists to others, and especially to young women, to show them that they too can become scientists, right? No matter where they come from. If they come up milking cows on a tiny little village in New York State like I did. So I went to college and I was still really interested in talking to animals, okay? And I was actually a chemistry major, but chemistry is actually a funny thing, because chemicals are actually the way by which all life interacts, actually. So we use molecules we eat things that are made of molecules, and we actually can communicate with each other and with other organisms through molecules. And this is called chemical ecology. So what I studied actually when I left college was this field of chemical ecology. And I had the chance to do research in Lund University in Sweden. I was awarded a Fulbright scholarship. I went to a very small college where we didn't do research, but I was awarded a scholarship to do research in Sweden. And there I studied this idea of chemical ecology and how plants and animals and bacteria and fungi and everything uses chemicals to interact with each other. They use chemicals to protect each other, to protect themselves. They use chemicals to attract other organisms to them, like pheromones, and they use chemicals also to get food and get nutrients. So this is what I studied, and I spent my career doing it. And from there I went to do graduate school and to do a postdoctoral research. And then I worked in Germany for a number of years at the Max Planck Institute for Chemical Ecology. But I really wanted to push myself further, and I was really interested in biodiversity. So biodiversity is this concept that all these animals and plants and microbes, we all have to live together on this planet, and we all rely on each other in order to survive. You know, as humans, we rely on all the other organisms around us to survive, not just as farmers, but actually just to get through the day. We need a lot of other organisms. The bacteria in our bodies helps us. The bacteria around us helps us and can sometimes hurt us. And so all of these things are important. And I had the chance, right when I was deciding where to go next after Germany, to visit India for the first time. And there I went to this area in the Western Ghats called the Agumbe Rainforest Station, okay? And when I was there, I went with a young graduate student he was doing this thing called light trapping, okay? And light trapping is where you hang up a white sheet at night and you just shine a light on it and everything gets attracted to the light, like insects and bats and all the little night creatures get attracted to it. And I watched as hundreds of different species of grasshoppers and moths and fruit bats and even some small mammals all came flocking to this net. And I had never in my entire life seen so many different kinds of organisms in one place at one time. And I actually cried. I remember just standing there with tears streaming down my face. And I knew beyond a doubt that India was the place where I had to go. So I came to India because of India's biodiversity, because of India's relationship that it has with its biodiversity, because of the number of people in India. We have 20% of the world's population, as everybody knows, but we also have 20% of the world's biodiversity hotspots. And that creates a big conundrum, is how do we actually coexist together? And I think that there's no better place in the world to study this than India. And that's why I came to work in India. So I had the opportunity to become a faculty member at the National Center for Biological Sciences after I decided that India was the place for me. I also realized that NCBS was the place for me to go. It's the country's premier biological institute. It has amazing people, it has amazing resources, and more than anything else, it has amazing students. So we have the best and brightest young leaders that you can imagine in India, the smartest people I've ever met. And so I had the opportunity to build this work I'm doing in biodiversity in India. And as I started doing my research, of course, I had to do research in this amazing biodiversity. So I've done research in Kashmir and Nagaland and Assam, and of course, the Western Ghats, obviously, and Coorg and the coffee plantations, the most unbelievable environments that you can possibly imagine. And if any of the people listening to this have not seen these places, please do, because they are really, the wealth that India has in terms of its natural ecosystems is it's just unparalleled. As I was traveling to these places, I had a very, very important experience when I was in Sikkim. So we do a lot of research in the mountains in North Sikkim, pretty close to the border, and in Lachen, in that area. And we were doing research on pollination, so on flowers and insects and birds and how they find each other and how they pollinate. You know, pollination is really important for our ecosystems to survive. And we did this research in this beautiful rhododendron valley with all of these sunbirds and butterflies and bees. It was like heaven. It was what I imagine heaven must look like in the springtime in Sikkim. You know, it's a beautiful colors of the buttercups and the strawberries and the smells of these sweet flowers blooming. And so we were just ecstatic to be doing research there. And I came back the next year and it was a parking lot. It had been paved over and plowed over completely for development, which was a little odd because it was kind of in the middle of nowhere. But, you know, that was the decision that was made. And so it was gone. And all of that biodiversity was just gone. And it was the second time in India where I stood in the environment and cried, but for a very different reason. Not because I'd found biodiversity, but because I'd lost it. And I started talking to people in the local area about what they were doing. And I had met so many people who were doing wonderful things, wonderful, you know, work to try to work with local communities and get them to work with biodiversity, everything from organic farming to actually, you know, retaining water, watersheds and other aspects, and also a lot of social issues related to this as well, because our ecosystems are inherently tied to our livelihoods and our ability to be prosperous. You know, our land prosperity links directly to our prosperity as people. And so I met all of these organizations, but I realized that none of them were working together. They were all doing their own thing. They were doing great work, no doubt, but they all could only do so much because they were working on their own. And because I was at NCBS, I had the chance to meet the principal scientific advisor at the time, KV Jayaraghavan. He was the PSA, he just started his job in 2018. And I met with him because he was also the former director of our campus, and he's a professor there. And so he came on Saturdays once in a while, and I caught him for tea. And I said, Vijay, you are the PSA. What are you going to do about this fact that, you know, these are scientific issues, right? You're the scientific advisor, and all these organizations are essentially dealing with scientific issues, but they're all working separately. And he said, well, what do you think we should do? And that's what gave birth to the ECHO Network, which is what I now direct. And the ECHO Network's idea is to bring these organizations together, bring scientists like myself from academic institutes and research institutes, bring NGOs, bring local governments, bring industry as well, all together to the table, find out what each other is doing, and try to do it better together, and particularly try to use science and technology insight to do it, because ultimately these issues of biodiversity loss and climate change and sustainability have a strong scientific basis. And so we need scientific insight to solve these problems, but it needs to be coupled with understanding the societal aspects of it. And that can only come by having us work together. So we're now over 1,100 people strong, crossing 24 countries. And this is exactly what we do. We meet together, we share ideas, we plan goals together, and we share resources to try to create actionable outputs in communities and in cities and in states, and maybe even at the national level for these issues and sustainability. So that's what I'm doing right now. So there are several, but there's one in particular that happened very recently that has really, really shaped my outlook on life, that I think is the one that comes to mind first. And we have a very small campus, and we have a very close-knit campus. Actually, we only have about 30 some faculty at our institute. So we have a few hundred students. Okay, so we know each other. And a few years ago, we experienced the loss of two students who took their own lives. They both happened to be women. They both happened to be students I knew quite well. And my own nephew, my brother's son, had just taken his own life the year before. So I was still really recovering from that experience, and as much as anyone recovers from these kind of things, I guess I was learning to cope with it, is a better way of putting it. And then this happened, and I just felt so compelled to act, right? I just felt really, we have to do something. We have to change it. We have to fix the system. It has to be better, and I just threw myself into, talking with students, talking with faculty, trying to do as much as possible, understanding the rules. And that process, and I was in pain myself, and I was suffering myself because I was also, very close to these students. And that experience really taught me, because I met all of these different types of people. Everybody felt terrible. There was nobody who was apathetic about these situations. Everybody felt that it was a terrible thing that happened and a terrible loss of life and should be avoided at all costs. Nobody thought differently, but they all had a different reaction to what they had to do with the connection with any solutions that would be done. Some of them felt that there was nothing to be done. Others felt that, anything they could do wouldn't really have an impact. And others felt that maybe it wasn't even connected with them. And then still others felt there wasn't, it was a fluke or chance incidents that don't really relate to what's really happening. And that experience really made me realize that if we want to make systemic changes, like we're trying to do with the ECHO Network and sustainability, that it's not enough to just have people care about sustainability. They have to not only feel that they have value in becoming more sustainable, but they also have to take responsibility for it. And unless you have all three of those attributes in every single human being on this planet, we won't truly achieve those SDGs that we're all trying to get towards. So that experience it's still extremely painful for me to think about. And caused a lot of trauma, to be honest, in my life, but it was very valuable because it helped me have this realization that we won't be able to come together and we won't be able to make the changes that we need to see unless each of us see the need to make those changes and see that we are part of the change that needs to be made. One of my first influential people in my life, and I'm sure this is true for many of people out there, is their family, right? And my father has and continues to be a huge influence in my life. My dad never graduated from college. You know, he actually left school to go into the Navy to make money for his family. He's the oldest boy of 10 children, okay? So he worked really hard all his life, but he is incredibly bright. And he read all the time, and he read everything he could get his hands on. And he asked lots of questions, and he was curious. And most of all, he was curious about people. He loves people, and he loved talking to people, and he loved interacting with them. And he showed so much compassion for other people. And you could tell that he could see the stories in every single person and the value in every single person. So it didn't matter. It didn't matter who he was talking to. If he was talking to, you know, the farmer next door, or if he was talking to a high-level politician, he had the same interest, because he realized that every single person that he met had value and could teach him something valuable that he could take with him. And I think that's one of the most important lessons that I've learned in my life was from him, was that every person has their own story, every person has worth, and every person has value to you if you only stop and listen to them. And that's why our network is called the Echo Network. The echo is the idea that you give something back and you listen for it to come back to you. And so I've taken that lesson that my father taught me with me my whole life. I have had many. I think that, you know, I've met so many amazing people throughout my career, from all different backgrounds, you know, people working in communities, and people running institutes, people, you know, being scientific advisors as well. And each of them have influenced me in their own way. But I think the greatest influences I've had have been from my students, because I have been fortunate to work with, as I've mentioned earlier, some of the brightest people that I've ever met. And their passion and their conviction and their vision for a better tomorrow is incredibly valuable to me. It keeps me going especially when I have see bad things and bad things happen, and see apathy. And you know, in our world of sustainability, it's 2 steps forward and 2 steps back most of the time. But they're the ones, and seeing their optimism, and honestly seeing that they're the ones that we have to carry the future for, right? They're the ones who grow beyond us. And that is really what influences me. So I would say my students. I do think that camp had a huge influence on my choice of being a scientist, because like I said, you know, no one around me was a scientist, right? No one in my family was a scientist. I'm a first generation college student, as I've mentioned. So I didn't even know what a PhD was, honestly. I didn't even know, the only doctors I knew were the medical doctors in the hospital, right? I didn't know you could be a doctor of anything else, right? A doctor of philosophy wasn't even on the radar when I was a kid. So this concept of being a scientist was very, very foreign to me. And it was really that camp that was the first time that I had the opportunity to see myself as a scientist. But I also have to say, you know, I'm incredibly fortunate. I've mentioned my father and my mother as well. They really raised me and my 2 brothers to do whatever we wanted to do. They actually didn't push us to, you know, make a lot of money or to go in this profession or that profession, although I'm sure that they wanted us to be secure, just like any good mom and dad do. But they really let us explore what we were most interested in. And I'd always been interested in nature. I loved the natural world. I loved, you know, like I said, I wanted to talk to animals, and I catch fireflies, and I'd catch caterpillars and keep them and watch them turn into moths or butterflies and then release them, right? So this is my childhood, and they saw that. So they really encouraged these experiences in me. And I think that as a parent now myself, this is also what I try to do for my daughter, is I really just want her to explore her own dreams. And my job as a parent is to help her have those options to explore her dreams, right? You know, what she does will be her own choice, but I'm very grateful to my parents for giving that to me. If you ask me if I've had any failures, I would have to tell you that I have not, because I don't believe in failure. Have I had things not work? Absolutely. Have I had lots of challenges? Have I wanted to quit and leave science even many times? Absolutely. But each of those experiences has given me a chance to learn and grow. And I've looked back on my life, and the points where I have grown the most have been the worst times in my life, if I really look back on it. The times where I really felt like I couldn't do this anymore. I wanted to crawl under a rock or stay in bed and not get out. So for me, I don't believe in failure. And success to me is also not a point where you've achieved a specific goal. Success to me is the point where you have all the tools and skills available to really make a difference in this world. So that's success to me. And you could be successful at 12, or you could be successful at 70. It depends on what you want to do and what difference you want to make. And so that's why I don't believe in age either. I don't believe that, if you're not successful by 30, you haven't made it. What does that mean, right? You can do something to change the world when you're 85. You can do something to change the world when you're 10. So successes and failures to me are really rather opportunities to learn and to grow and to make this world a better place. But one of the challenges that I will say that really shaped me and shaped my decision to do the kind of work I do, which is actually slightly outside of academia, it's really working between academia and other organizations, was when I started to be a scientist. I became a scientist because I wanted to make the world a better place. Okay, I was curious. I loved nature. I loved exploration, but it was all a means to the end of trying to leave this world better than when I came into it, in whatever way I could do that. Okay, small or big. And when I went into academia, I realized that, especially in our world of biodiversity and sustainability and ecosystems, that a lot of the stuff that we need to do right now in terms of science and academic research isn't the kind of stuff that gets into the high-level journals. It's not the stuff that gives you the promotion level sort of citations and things like that we scientists actually need in order to, number one, get jobs, and number two, get tenure and get promotion and all of the things that are in academia. So I became incredibly frustrated. And so I was railing and pushing against this world of academia and saying, but I want to work on things like climate change in the Himalayas. Why can't I get this published? This is really important. And everybody said, yeah, it's important, but it's not the stuff that's going to get in, this journal or that journal. And I realized that either I could keep on banging my head against this, this current state of academia that we're in, or I could create a different system. And that's the other purpose of the ECHO Network, is to allow science to happen and allow scientific discourse to happen in farms, in aquifers in a local village, in, a sanitation waste treatment plant in the city, where it absolutely is essential that it happens now. We can't wait till next year or 2 years from now or 5 years from now for academia to realize like this is also important. And I just want to say, this doesn't mean that academic research is not important. There's a lot of value to just exploring the world, understanding how cells in our body work, or how beams of light work. There's value in that kind of research. But that's not my goal, is not to just understand our world. I want to make it better. And so for me, the current state of academia became really frustrating, and I wanted to do something different. So that was a major challenge, not a challenge in the same way that suicides were a challenge, or the loss of my field site was a challenge, but it was also a big challenge for me. If I can say one more, I don't know. Another challenge that I've had, which I've in many ways brought on myself, it's being a woman in science, has been quite challenging at many times. I find that at this day and age, being a woman scientist is not so surprising to people anymore, but it doesn't mean that you necessarily have a voice. So after you get to a certain level, I just thought I would just get taken seriously, and that I would just be, people would just listen to what I had to say. And I realized that that's not necessarily true, that, you know, sometimes I'm the woman on the committee or the woman speaker, but I'm there because, you know, I have to fill a seat. And so that has challenged me and made me realize that I can't wait for people to respect me. I can't wait for some magical time period where, you know, I will just achieve the gold star where everyone will say, oh, yes, Shannon, yes, we listen to you now. That I have to take every opportunity I have and make my voice heard. And sometimes that requires being a little bit pushy, which I've had to learn to be, being a little bit assertive, not aggressive, but assertive, like saying, I'm sorry, you need to listen because this is important. What I have to say is important. And because I have a seat at the table and so many people do not. And so I also feel that that's really important. So those challenges that I've faced of being an outsider, sometimes being an outsider as a foreigner living in India, and an outsider being a woman in science, or an outsider in all of these different ways, actually gives me a unique superpower to be able to speak up and to say things and to push myself even harder than I might have otherwise if I was in a comfort zone with a bunch of people that were exactly like me. So I found that challenging, but also very rewarding, and has forced me to, you know, put on my big pants and my big jacket and take charge of my situation. I think that maybe it's a little bit of a reiteration of what I've said before, but to maybe put it more directly, I think the two biggest lessons for me, one about myself and one about us, I guess, as humans, which I'm still trying to learn, and I will be learning until I'm, you know, on my deathbed, I think, is that as a woman, we have to respect ourselves, and we have to value our own voice, and we have to realize that we don't have to have this education or that job or that status to have something to say. And I think so few women realize that about themselves. We talk about empowering women, but you can't empower somebody else. They have to take the power in themselves, right? And I think that so many of us have been told for so long that we can't have a voice, right? That we can't have anything to say. And it's simply not true. And if I could give the gift to every other woman in the world, you know, where whoever they are, it's that their voice is important. And they can't wait for somebody to give them a voice. They have to take that voice. And that's something that I learned, sometimes very difficult, the hard way, but I've realized it's important that I need to just take that action and sometimes demand the respect, right, from others, and not wait for it to be given, and not expect that it's going to be there necessarily from the beginning. The other big lesson that I've learned is that I truly believe this. I don't know if it's a lesson, but it's become really a philosophy of my life, is that I think that we have everything we need on this planet right now to solve any problem that exists. I really believe that. I don't think there's any problem out there for which there's not already a solution. The problem, I feel, is that we as human beings don't listen enough to each other. We don't pay attention to each other, we don't value each other, and we don't communicate with each other and work together. And I firmly believe that if we just learned to do that better and work together better, that we would solve any problem out there. I really feel that that's true with every fiber of my being. And that's really what our network is trying to contribute to, in whatever way we can, is to help people, provide a mechanism for people to do that. So I don't have any regrets, because I've said before about failure, right? I feel the same way, that everything that's happened to me, even the really, really terrible things, even terrible things that I've done, have all been opportunities for me to grow, and for me to be a better person, and for me to make a better difference in this world. So I don't have any regrets. However, that said, I do wish that I'd have learned this lesson about respect a little bit earlier, because I spent so many years just on the treadmill thinking, okay, if I only get this title, if I only do this, if I only publish this paper, if I only go to this conference, if I only speak to this person, if I only get this award, then I'll be able to do this. And I realized that that never happens, right? It never happens. It just, you have to take every opportunity that you have and realize your own voice. And I think I would have had a voice a lot earlier if I'd have realized that. So maybe that's something I would have changed. I think that's something that especially women need to hear more. I think that we're often taught we need to be this or do this or achieve this, that we're never as good as someone else, right? And I always felt that way. I never felt good enough. And I realize now that I'm enough. I have been asked this question before, and I've always give the same answer. I think I have an irrational desire to change the world. Okay. It's a very cocky thing to say that you want to change the world. I mean, who the heck are you? You're one of what, almost 8 billion or more people on the world, soon to be 9 billion in some years. But I think that that desire is what drives me on. And you can never, it's not an endpoint, right? There's no endpoint to it. You can continuously make the world a better place in lots of ways, making, living more sustainably. My daughter, having a child, has made the world a better place. She makes the world a better place. There's so many ways I see that I've already made positive changes just by existing, but I want to make more. And so I have this drive in me every morning to say, what can I do this morning? What can I do today that will help this world be a better place to live in for my daughter and for all my students and for everybody who comes after me. So the work I do more than anything else is I'm a catalyst and a facilitator of action. I love people. I love to hear their stories. Every single person I meet is valuable to me. I take with me, I keep them in my heart. And I try to use that spirit to help them to work better together. As I've mentioned, I feel that all the solutions we need for sustainability are already available to us, that we just need to work together. So the social impact that I am trying to have and that we're already making through our network is the socialness in itself, getting people to work together. Even just meeting each other. It's amazing how many organizations are working side by side in the same city, doing similar things or at least compatible things, and they don't even know each other. And so a lot of the impact we've had is just saying, here, meet each other. Here, you both are doing the same things, and we're always looking for resources. We're always looking for funding, right? If you're an NGO, funding is probably the number one thing that you never have and that you're always looking for. But then, so we always ask, what do you need the funding for? And maybe they need the funding for doing research. And maybe this organization does research and will help them do your research at no cost. So a lot of the work we do is also trying to get organizations to just share each other's resources and then realize that maybe they don't need as much money as they thought because they can actually just work collaboratively. So that's the kind of social impact we're doing. And it's already starting to yield fruit. We're already giving birth to new initiatives that are actually working on their own, that have come out of these introductions that we've made, and they're now working together on their own. So, and we also are seeing young leaders that have participated in our efforts actually go on to start being teachers in sustainability. So this is the kind of impact we're making. I suppose inspiration is probably one of the fundamental things that we try to provide. So I am so grateful for one bizarre thing. The pandemic was a horrendous experience. It was tragic and terrible for all of us. Every single one of us was affected. But one amazing outcome is that people got used to doing meetings online. That has been such a blessing to me, because before that, I would have to fly from Bangalore to Delhi, I don't know, like every other week, it felt like, to do some 1 hour meeting because they insisted that they couldn't do it any other way. And it was such a terrible, I mean, as someone who values biodiversity and sustainability, it was like my worst nightmare to have to fly to Delhi every other week. And now it's fine. We can always do a video chat. Sure, there's no substitute for face-to-face meetings, but if all you got to do is review something or go over a specific point, you don't need to have an in-person meeting for 30 minutes, right? If you're going to do some 2-3 hour meeting, do it in person. So that, I think, is one of the best ways that has helped me to live more sustainability, is this realization that we can have these sort of online meetings. And also the improvement of technology and our grid in India has really helped that, because another problem was that, people just didn't have the bandwidth to be able to have these conversations, and that's improved a lot in the past 2 or 3 years. I can talk to really remote areas, in the Northeast now, and it's working well. So that's really great, because that's allowed me to keep connections with people a lot better. So I would say that's one of the biggest things, because otherwise I would be traveling a lot, and that is really, really, really bad for your carbon footprint. So our network has a 15-year perspective going forward. And our goal is that we don't have to exist after 15 years. Okay, that's why our plan is that we create this framework for getting people to work together. We encourage collaboration, and that 15 years from now, people just start to think, who can I work with to solve this problem? It's the first thing they do and not the last, like it is now. And that this way of working together and trying to solve problems together, and together, I mean also with communities, also with the individuals who eventually carry out whatever actions you come up with, that this is just the way things happen. So that's my vision. My vision is that collaboration and working together is just a way of life. It's not something that we have to push forward, that I have to create some network to do. That is just the way things work. So to see that this is happening across different sectors, that the distrust that we have now with organizations like, for example, NGOs distrusting industry, or industry distrusting the government, or the government all of these sort of distrust that we have start to dissipate, and that people start to get rid of their fears of each other and mistrust of each other, and work together. So I would say that's my personal goal, is to be able to see that being realized beyond me. I mean, I already am to some small extent, but I'd like to see this happen at a much, much larger, much more international level, because India's problems are unique to India, and only India can solve their problems. But India is not the only one going through sustainability problems. And India can certainly take information and knowledge and learnings from everywhere in the world. There's people that can work with them. And I want to see us be more open to each other, to see us be more open to ideas from other places, to have them be more open to ideas from India, particularly, and all the knowledge that India has, especially traditional knowledge, which rarely goes outside of the country. So I think there's a lot of opportunities here. So that would be my goal, is to see this happen really at a global scale, because we have to solve these problems globally, because eventually we're just on one planet, right? And these problems go way, way beyond our borders. Oh, you asked me a hard question. I don't think a lot about myself. I guess you probably gathered that from this conversation. I think mostly about everybody else and how I can help them. I think very little about myself. Maybe that's my goal. Let that be my goal, because I think that's important, right? I talk so much about how you have to value yourself and respect yourself. You also have to want things for yourself. So I'm going to let that be my goal. And that's something I'm still working on. I spend it in nature, of course. I go out wherever I am in the world. If I'm in Bangalore, I will go, I work on this amazing campus, this agricultural campus, GKVK, which has this beautiful banyan tree, very huge, and it has so much biodiversity in it. These little owlets live in it, and I'll just go and watch them and just watch the insects and watch the birds and see them living their own lives completely oblivious of mine. And that's what fulfills me, because that's really reminds me of what we're doing this all for, is for this planet, this beautiful planet that we live on.